Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, You Snooze, You Lose, Qualify to Win. We are so excited to have you with us, and thank you to all of those who submitted questions at registration. You really help us shape the webinar and the content for what you would like to hear, so we are very grateful for that. This slide session will be recorded. Slides and the recording will be up on the Shipley website by tomorrow. Should you have any questions during the webinar today, you can submit those in the questions tab of your control panel. I will be monitoring those, so we will get to as many questions as we can. We have a great panel with us. Sam Singh is the Managing Director of Shipley India. Kedron Dillard is the Vice President of Talent and Strategic Accounts of the Shipley US. Daryl Jones is the Senior Vice President of Business Development in the Shipley US. And of course, we have Brad Douglas, Executive Vice President of Global Strategy. And he will moderate today's session. So thank you all for joining us, panelists and attendees. We are so happy to have you with us. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Brad.
Okay, and that was Mallory Price, and she makes all of this possible. So thank you all for joining and setting aside a little time today, especially those on our panel. Here's what we shaped the webinar around. Again, based on some feedback from you and some common areas of improvement that we hear about as we work with clients. We're going to talk just a little bit about today's competitive environment. Hopefully, if the technology works, play a little video clip. It'll take a few minutes. For those of you joining in other ways other than actually online, you probably will not see or hear the video, so that's okay. Hang with us. We'll come back after the video and talk about what we just saw. So again, some of you may not see the video depending on how you chose to join the webinar today, but that will be coming up and just give you a heads up there. So we'll talk about the environment that we're in as far as business development today, traps to avoid, the importance of qualifying. You know, it's so important that we learn to qualify opportunities. We're going to talk about some of those best practice areas for qualifying and engaging customers, especially in the environment that we're in right now. A little bit about a value proposition. This keeps coming up in several of your questions to us, is how do we better communicate a value proposition as we're qualifying opportunities and filling our pipeline. And then hopefully we'll have a little time after for some questions that Mallory can direct to us. But this quote I found pretty interesting. The physics of account development. A customer at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. So we snooze, we lose. You know, we have to take the initiative as business developers, capture man, whatever our role is. We've got to be the ones initiating the activity. We can't sit back and wait. So as many of you know, today's selling environment is different. We are in a different place today than we were several years ago, even in some cases several months ago when it comes to business development. The biggest issue at the heart of all this is trust. Can our prospective clients, prospective customers trust us as trusted partners? So in today's environment, boy, it is harsh. Customers we're trying to sell to sometimes have a pretty harsh attitude about business development and those trying to sell or position services. Technology is changing the way we have to identify, qualify, and advance opportunities all the time. More and better information about the buyer and the seller is available. So we should have at our fingertips a lot more information about our customers, our prospective buyers. They definitely have more information about us. And again, a lot of this boils down to trust. And in today's environment, it's getting a little harder. than it used to be to develop and establish that trust. But that is just so important. So again, the new reality is customers buy from people and organizations they trust. If they don't know you, they may not buy from you. Let's just acknowledge that. Customers buy from people who know their business. This is part of what we want to talk about today, the importance of getting to know our customers' business now that we maybe have a little more time to do that. Customers want to get the best value, of course, they do. The best product for the best price. Suppliers have to understand the customer needs and issues. Even in a time when we can't go shake hands and meet face to face with clients, we can still try to understand their hot buttons. Suppliers and partners have to sell the way the customer prefers to buy. More and more, whether it's business to business or business to government, the ways that our customers are acquiring products and services is shifting, and it's changing. And we have to be sensitive, and we have to be the ones that adapt to that. We have to sell or present solutions the way the customer wants them presented. Suppliers who can demonstrate solutions with value certainly have the advantage. So there's just a quick, simple backdrop of the current business environment we're in. I'm going to try now to share a video with the group. And again, depending on what mode you've joined us in, you may or may not be able to see this. But for those of you that are online, you should be able to watch this video and hear it. And if you can't, bear with us. We'll come back online and talk about it and complete the rest of the webinar. So this should take us about 7 minutes or so. So let's take a look.
As consumers, the way we buy has forever changed. We no longer rely on physical shops. We visit stores out of choice and not necessity. And when we do decide to make a purchase, be it online or in a shopping mall, we know that the balance of power between seller and consumer has shifted in our favor. We've comparison shopped from the comfort of our computers, tablets, or even smartphones. We've listened to what others have to say about the product, our fellow consumers whose opinions we value, even though we've never met them. We may even have communicated with the seller by email, text, or through their Facebook site. We buy only when we are satisfied that we have covered all of the angles. Some may argue that business-to-business buying and selling behavior is different. The big-ticket items are not like consumer goods, and the greater level of sophistication requires a different, dare we say it, more traditional approach. But consider this. While all consumers are not business people, all business people are consumers. Research is clearly demonstrating that business is adopting, adapting, and utilizing some of the very same buyer-empowering tactics that we've become so adept at using as consumers. Let me share a startling thought with you. Your business is likely involved in many sales cycles right now that you know nothing about. And it's not through any fault of your own necessarily. The fact is you're not directly involved in the sales cycle because the buyer doesn't want you involved yet. Recent research has estimated that buyers are often anywhere from 50 to 60% or more through the sales cycle before they ever engage with the salesperson. Think about that for a moment. Your ideal buyer could be anywhere from halfway to 2/3 of the way through their buying process before they consider connecting directly with you. And of course, the more worrying issue is, how often do you get eliminated from a buying process in favor of a competitor and you never even knew you were competing? Yes, the world of selling is changing. The buyer is in control and they've changed the rules of the game. But like any evolution or even revolution, smart companies learn how to play and excel under the new rules. But surely, as some will argue, there is still a relationship element in every sale, a trust factor, a credentialing process. The truth is there is a conversation taking place. This process is happening. It's just happening in a different way, and often with people other than the vendor. Information, for example, is being shared and exchanged with their peers through networking sites like LinkedIn. Or in fact, they are interacting with us, but not in overt ways like in the past. They may be asking questions on our LinkedIn group or accessing information for our website or YouTube site.
The challenge that we have as sales and marketing professionals is by not being in the room, in the conversation, when that information is changing hands, we miss out on the understanding of how that information impacted the buyer. We don't see their body language. We don't see if they're interested and engaged or disinterested and disengaged.
Individual salespeople have to be able to target messages to constituencies within their customers' organizations. There's no such thing anymore as a standard message or a standard value proposition. That has to be customized and tailored and focused toward individual constituencies within individual customers.
Every salesperson needs to understand what comes up when they Google their company name, their product names, when they Google their biggest customers. They need to know what comes up because that's exactly what potential customers are doing. By the way, here's something else that most salespeople don't know, and I would challenge salespeople on this. If you're about to have a conversation with a potential customer, many of those potential customers will Google you or go to LinkedIn and find out information about you personally, you as the salesperson. If a whole bunch of great information about how wonderful and helpful you are and maybe your blog and your Twitter feed comes up, wow, that's pretty interesting. This person's pretty happening out there. Obviously, the market trusts this person. Look at all the comments on their blog. Look at how many people are engaged with them by following them on Twitter. Maybe I should trust this person. Nobody does that. Salespeople don't do that, because they're focused on this old way of thinking.
Sales in the modern era is still about creating value, but the way that value is created and the media used to create that value is changing. A salesperson today becomes part researcher, part micro-marketer. They need to have a greater level of business acumen than ever. They need to be insatiably curious about the business of their customers, even when those businesses are spread across multiple segments and verticals. They need to be bringing insight and ideas to their customers and creating value at every juncture of the buying cycle, understanding that the velocity of business change is only increasing.
Changes are happening faster than ever before inside the customer. And the winners are getting in there before a need develops. What they're doing is they're challenging the customer with ideas, with possibilities, more and more looking to create value and to keep a presence there in the customer.
Bottom line is that the successful salesperson going forward will not be relying on one or two modes of interacting with a buyer, but will be adept at seamlessly leveraging everything from face-to-face selling to indirect selling through value creation in online groups and everything in between. Furthermore, it becomes critical that a selling organization understands that their messages, their communications, regardless of how it is delivered, must be buyer-focused, it must be consistent, and it must be valuable. It cannot simply fluctuate from marketing broadcast speak to sales product push, but rather it needs to be insightful, targeted, value-creating at every stage of the buying cycle. The solution is simple. If we focus on the buyer, learn their language and be guided by their preferences, and seek at every interaction, whether direct or indirect, to create value for them, then we will be very successful. But, as with all things, simple does not always equate to easy.
Insightful. I think it conveyed exactly the topic of this webinar. You know, if we snooze and sit back and wait, business will not come our way. So thanks for joining in that. So just in a couple of key points in summary of that. You know, the message from that was that the amount of data now that customers have access to is so much greater than before. They're so much more and better informed. There was a comment in there that sometimes a customer might be 50 to 60% of the way into the sales cycle, maybe even the decision-making cycle, before a capture manager, a salesperson, or BD person is engaged. And sellers have to adjust how they sell, not just the products and services they sell. That came through loud and clear. If we're not insightful, I think was a word used, targeted, then we're just one of many, and we don't stand out. So, Daryl, I'm wondering if you would walk us through now. We kind of talked about the environment we're in, the customer-buyer relationship a little bit. Would you now walk through some of the common, you've been doing this a long time. Daryl, by the way, worked for Harvard Business Review before joining Shipley, and he has some really good insight. For years, he's been over an entire Salesforce and business development team here at Shipley. And Daryl, will you talk to us about some of the traps and pitfalls you see out there and you hear about?
Yeah, Brad, sure. Thanks. Happy to do it. And just to add, in this position, not only do I run the sales organization, business development for Shipley, I have the great opportunity to spend time with many of our clients focused on their BD challenges, both commercial business-to-business entities as well as those selling to government entities. So there are a lot of similarities, and I thought about, what are the areas where organizations, whether they be an individual business developer or BD organizations, tend to snooze, right? Kind of lose their focus. And the first one is sticking to the same old suspects and not branching out. So I think particularly in a commercial environment, if I would challenge most anybody on the call, if you looked back at your top clients 10 years ago and compared it with your top 10 clients today, they would be drastically different. I know I see this a lot. And organizations that have a mentality of, I'll just continue to sell to our current customers and keep them happy without a very healthy mix of new business focus as part of their strategy, it's a losing proposition. It's a snooze that can change on a dime. Market competition, new entries into the market, change in leadership with different philosophies, organizations being acquired by bigger entities, and so on. There are 100 different reasons that a client relationship can fade very quickly. So this is something that has to be always on the top of the list. Then there's, a passive approach to BD, waiting for the phone to ring. I had a salesperson that worked for me, and he'd been in kind of a slump for about 4 months, pipeline review and everything. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it? I called him back the next week, and he said, okay, so I made the decision. I'm either going to redouble my efforts, accept where I am right now, or I can continue to sit here and sprinkle fairy dust on my phone and hope that a customer calls me with a need. And so he kind of got the point that he had to be very proactive in his business development activities, and within just a handful of months had completely turned his fortune. So that's a snooze that must be avoided. Nobody's buying. That was, I think for many organizations, the first reaction to COVID-19. What is this going to do to our customer base? Nobody probably is going to be buying in this environment. But even more broadly than that, market conditions, it's easy to assume that the customers are not buying. If that's the thought, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They will not buy because we are not actively engaging with them, adding value. It may be more difficult to get to the buying decision, but they're definitely buying. The business is not closed. Not qualifying opportunities. I'll just, we have a different section on this, but this is a real problem for organizations, is not having a good qualification process. We'll talk more about that. Letting the pipeline grow stale. Most of you probably operate in a CRM environment, and there are various kinds of reports that identify opportunities that are kind of stuck and grow stale in the pipeline. I had a client I was talking to recently that has monthly pipeline reviews with each of the business development people in his organization. And the idea was that he was going to go in and talk with them and try to scrub out those old stale opportunities, and actually started taking a wire brush to the meeting as an indication that we are here to, you let me know why those should stay in your pipeline, or why they're growing stale, why they should still be there or not, or we're going to get rid of them and we're going to get integrity in your pipeline. So this is a real problem, not paying attention to aging opportunities and vetting those and getting them out. And then another is taking a traditional approach. I've always done it this way. I work strictly on customer relationships. I'm not going to bother with social media and so on. But again, as we saw from the video, that flies in the face of our current reality, that buyers do search out information. They learn about the company, they learn about you as an individual. And I'll tell you, I'm surprised when I go out on LinkedIn to find profiles of people in business development, the number that don't even have a LinkedIn page. And yet that's where their potential buyers are likely trying to find them and learn more about them. So if you're not involved in social media, change that.
That's awesome, Daryl. Thanks. And that's perfect. I've seen myself fall into a lot of those traps over the years, and that was a great reminder. We got a lot of questions on this too, Daryl, at registration, and that is drilling a little deeper on the idea of identifying and qualifying opportunities early. So you see a couple points here on the screen. It's important that we do that, early to give us the best chance of winning, that we rigorously qualify. Would you walk us through a pipeline of how an organization might start thinking more clearly about qualifying their pipeline?
Yeah, sure, Brad, thanks. And this is a big one. I mean, it's a chronic problem across all industries, is how to move opportunities from the very beginning through and win business. Let's remember that the pipeline is a method of getting to winning business. That's what it is, right? It's not about the pipeline per se, but it's about the integrity of the pipeline and the discipline of making decisions along the way to get the highest probability opportunities through to the proposal preparation stage. Now, organizations will have different phases, sales stages, whatever they're called. This is what Shipley is kind of our standard. It starts with somebody, in BD or sales identifying a potential opportunity and determining if they have interest in researching it, learning more about it, whatever. And once they do that, then there should be a decision point that leads to an outcome. That outcome is, okay, this doesn't quite fit, so I think we'll just dump it now rather than wasting more time on it. Or I'm going to make a decision to pursue this, put it in my pipeline, and move forward. When it gets to that point, then you really are advancing into the capture phase. And as the deal moves along, eventually there's a preliminary decision. We need to start planning. We're likely to submit a proposal. And then if there's an RFP, then you would make a final bid decision there, depending on what the content of the RFP is, and then deciding to submit the proposal. Just, some general thoughts on that. When we talk about qualifying, what are we really doing here? It's essentially having some set of criteria that we look to facilitate good decision making. Things like, is this opportunity going to be a good strategic fit for us? Does it fit within our strategic planning and where we want to move forward as a company? Have we done enough research about the customer and the potential buy to determine if it is going to move forward? Do we understand their needs? Do we even understand who the competitive playing field is? Do we have any sense of how it's going to be priced? How do we need to price it in order to win? And ultimately, if we do win the deal, can we deliver with high quality product or service so that we have a happy customer and that leads to additional opportunities later on? And this is not a one-time thing, right? Qualifying needs to happen early, but it needs to happen all the way through the process. This is the big problem I see in organizations is once something hits the pursuit decision, it stays in the pipeline typically too long, and none of it's eliminated, right? And qualifying needs to go on along the way. And I kind of like this. I think it's a good analogy in terms of qualifying opportunities. Let's relate it to an oil refinery, right? So you take the crude oil out of the ground, it goes to the refinery, and it starts at the left side as the crude oil. And what you're trying to do at each phase of refining is eliminate waste, stuff that can't be used at the end, or compare it with BD, low probability of win items, and get those, out as quickly as possible. And ultimately, what you're looking for at the end is whatever comes out of the end of the pipeline should be a well-refined product or group of opportunities that have been well vetted, that have the highest probability of win, so that when we do spend the time and money and scarce internal resources to write a proposal, we go in very confident that we're going to win. What happens if the refining doesn't happen or the qualifying earlier in the process? Well, basically, you get a whole bunch of opportunities that the salesperson or the BD person may want to write proposals for, and yet there's really no science behind the why are we here? Why do we need to submit a proposal for this? Can we win? Can you answer those kinds of questions? And here's really the BD paradox, and that is that rational business development process is to eliminate the opportunities with poor strategic value and low win probability early. In other words, they bid less rather than bidding more. And successful organizations do bid less, but they win higher dollar value opportunities and actually increase their revenues by bidding less. So qualification and pipeline management, this is an area where an organization just simply can't snooze. And I guess the final comment, Brad, was this is really a high-level overview, but in terms of the how to do this and the approaches and tools and everything, that's part of our qualifying to win training workshop. So if you're interested in learning more about that, go out to our website and grab some information on that. So that's, with that, Brad, I'll turn it back to you.
So Daryl, just a comment, because I know a lot of people that join our webinars are from smaller organizations, and they respond to pretty quick turn opportunities. They don't have 30, 60, 90 days to think about it and necessarily run it through a complete decision gating process like this. Are there at least a few critical still qualification points people ought to be looking at, even if it's kind of a quick turn?
Yeah, so here's the way I think about something like that, Brad. And if you think about, there are just 3 points here. It relates to having understanding of 3 things. One is time. If we submit a proposal, can we deliver what the client wants on time? Are their expectations of delivery, service delivery in particular, in line with what we can really do? So time is one. The second is resources. There kind of needs to be an analysis of the balance between resources that our company will provide versus what they may provide if it is a service offering. If it's products, it's probably not as big a deal. But in other words, do we have the people to really do this and do it effectively? and deliver with quality, like I mentioned before. So that's the other one. And the third is money. So time, resources, and money. Money relates to, do we have a sense of what they are expecting to pay for this purchase? And is it in line with what our solution or our offer is likely to cost? So
Great.
I know it's difficult, but that's still, there needs to be some level of qualification up front. And I would suggest that if a customer is not willing to talk with you about those three, your organization about those three key elements, then you probably ought not to be bidding on that opportunity. And so I try to simplify short terms by looking at it through the lens of just those three items.
That's fantastic. So almost a return on investment of, can we actually pursue this even in a short window and get a return, that's, which kind of leads into this Inc. magazine quote. I found this fascinating. And how do you reach consumers who are stuck on the couch waiting out the coronavirus shutdown? I just found this so interesting, and so you'll read kind of the response, partial response to this article. While our entrepreneurial instincts may tell us to cut costs, now is a critical time for companies to invest in innovation to survive in the midst of COVID-19. So here's how I took that. Okay, yeah, the company might need to invest financially, but me personally, as a business development professional, I need to invest in just what we talked about earlier, new, better ways to reach out, and not have the mindset that the consumers are sitting on the couch waiting for this to pass. You address this, Daryl. Stop waiting for the phone to ring. Invest in getting to know our customers, their companies, our competitors, our competitive position. Invest in innovative ways to go secure and compete, not necessarily invest money in big ticket items or networks or things like that. So I just found this fascinating when it comes to innovation and innovating how we sell and how we go to market. So with that, Kedron, you got a great background. You helped stand up a business development organization for a commercial company that wanted to start targeting the government market. You've also worked for Bloomberg and Bloomberg Government pre-Shipley. And so I thought you would be a great person to talk about customer engagement and how can we take our engagement to the next level.
I appreciate that, Brad. Happy to. Great. Absolutely. Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. In sales or in any client-facing public sector, private sector, pre-COVID, in the midst of COVID, I think something to keep top of mind is you have to earn the right to engage with your customers. That should be the mindset. So the question is, how does one do that? I think the first, kind of task to keep top of mind is to plan and develop questions ahead of your virtual meeting. Pre-call plan your discussions. Don't just wing it. Determine ahead of time your objectives. Why are you reaching out? What do you want to take away from the call? It could be something as simply a win could be, agreeing the client or customer agreeing to talk to you again, agreeing for a follow-up call. It could be that kind of finite and simple, but have the goal in mind and ensure your pre-call planning or your questions map to this target. A second thing is, when you're in the conversation, ask follow-up questions. Be engaged. This could be something like requesting the timing of a client's decision or asking the ideal functionality, if they were able to just whiteboard what their ideal, service or product or in state, what would that look like? Have them do that for you. So you can kind of understand what their goal is, or at least understand kind of what's realistic and what potentially isn't with your service. Clarify and listen for impact. And I'll also add here, contribute to the conversation. What do you know about their industry? What is their competition doing in similar markets? What are the virtual, conferences that might have to do with their ecosystem or their space? Show that you understand, their market, and find a way to weave that in the conversation. When we talk about, conferences or bidder events, something that's specific to, the public sector, the bottom line here is make sure this is the time during COVID to attend these things, because everything is virtual. And I'm sure we've heard that in a number of capacities during this time. I would even argue, there's some companies, particularly on the private sector, that have hiring events. So just I'm not saying attend those events, but be knowledgeable as to, the types of events your customer or your potential client is posting about, is planning for, and maybe back into the whys behind that. And again, where you can join, where it makes sense to attend, show up, share with your client, that you did attend, and, that could ultimately, go towards your probability of winning.
Is it really worth it, Kedron?
Yeah, it's worth it. It's worth it. So, particularly, both, again, whether you're talking private or public sector, whether it's LinkedIn or even on their personal, kind of organization pages, research what they're talking about, the spotlights that they put on particular people within the organization. How are they tying what they do into current events? These are all things that will help you get to know the customer a little bit more. And you have, no idea when those types of findings can come up in your dialogue. If we have a moment, Brad, can we use one? For example, let's go to FEMA, for example. Again, I would even argue, even though this is a government, example, that some of the private sector websites might be a bit more robust in social media. So you never know. Going to the about page is always my first, kind of first hit, and look at FEMA, go to the blog site, Brad. Let's just kind of play around and see what they have there. This will just give you an idea of what FEMA finds important. What are they talking about? What do they want to show kind of people external to this agency or organization about the organization? Helps you learn a little bit more about the culture of FEMA. If you scroll all the way back up, Brad, on the right-hand side, you'll also see, other entities, their newsletters, their press releases, their social media presence. So, just again, you're looking for events, you're looking for notifications in that nature, but also looking for, how do they position their organization? What is the culture? And how do you weave that in when you're having FaceTime with your client? I'll give it back to you, Brad.
Thank you, Kedron, for that. And we don't have time today in this webinar, but we listed there. It's fascinating, and this gets back to that Inc. magazine quote. We can't just sit back and think that our customers are sitting on the couch. Wait, take this opportunity, invest in research, and you guys, everyone has said it. Customers, they want to buy from people that know their situation. Mm-hmm. And what better way than this, research these. Thank you, Kedron, for that. Appreciate it.
You got it.
So let's play on this because we are distanced, right, in the way we're doing business. Let's take this a little further as far as the snooze, you lose idea. We can't sit back. We can't wait. We can't hit the snooze button. Sam, I was wondering, your background is such that you've done a lot of social marketing, social media, selling. You represent all of Shipley, India. Would you walk us through some of these ideas for positioning ourselves leveraging social media and other trends?
Sure, thanks, Brad. What we learned the hard way is that intuitively we all like to be out there, put a message here, put a message there. But about 18 months ago, I said, no, we've got to have a coordinated campaign to make sure that all the messages that go out there is managed in a coordinated way. So make sure you expand your list. If you've got LinkedIn, see if your organization can get you Sales Navigator so that you can get more research on your prospects and your markets. And also make sure that it's multiple channels. I myself use LinkedIn, but my team are posting videos on YouTube. They're posting videos on platforms I've never heard of. I tasked one of my colleagues, Phoebe, who is from the US and lives in India, and I said, get to every learning and development director in our market through finding ways to get to them. And she's making incredible progress. We found, for example, one customer that does gene research, and they sell their services outside India, and they had a team of 50 proposal writers. We would never have learned about that had it not been the work that Phoebe did. Also, what we suggest is to create interest and visibility. You know, every day since the time we wake up till the time we get at our desk, we probably already consumed somewhere between 30 and 40 GB of information. So try something different. Try and create something very different. Recently, for example, I just received a missed parcel, and I thought I didn't order anything, and at my front door, this was delivered, and it was actually from my cable TV company, satellite TV, Sky. And I said, sorry, we've been unable to deliver you unmissable shows. Why is the reason for missed delivery? You've canceled your Sky subscription. And I was very impressed. I've kept this card here as a way of them grabbing my attention, despite having called me so many times. So try something different. No harm there. And then look at the fact that you're getting some progress. Look at the success you've had. What kind of feedback you're getting from people. Are you making progress? A lot of times we do this intuitively. This is an interesting one, is what is your brand? If you're a BD person, you really need to be your own brand ambassador. And often, like that video says, they would check you out. And they probably want to do business with you first and your company second, or the other way around. But you need to demonstrate. And it could be as simple as giving a comment to somebody else, or writing an article about reposting somebody's article. I reposted a Harvard Business Review article on courage, just quoting Nelson Mandela. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the concealment of fear. And I had over 2,500 views of something like that. So put something out there that establishes you with somebody who thinks more than just what you sell. And then be relevant. Recently, we did a webinar where we invited somebody to talk about home-life balance. And we thought, nobody's interested. Everyone's got used to working from home. But the questions we received, it was truly amazing to see it is a hot topic. So look at a hot topic, something adjacent to what you're already doing, but push your brand out, you as a person.
Sam, this is fantastic, and this is all about being proactive, like we've been saying, and thank you for that. Would you also, I know you've seen some failures where companies or individuals or organizations have stumbled at trying to do what you just suggested. Would you walk through a couple of ways or a couple of things we ought to avoid?
Yeah, certainly messages that put yourself in the recipient's shoes. And you know, just because we send a message doesn't mean people will read. So give it some thought. That is that message something that would really give value? if the message is generic, me too, then it would actually use up goodwill there. The other thing also is to look at the platform. And I don't want to be ageist here, but I think there are a lot of folks based on which part of the world they live, what kind of age, education they have different platforms. So use all the platforms where your target prospects are. Don't think that this platform is not for me. I'm constantly getting surprised at looking at what is the right platform to choose, and don't give up. And if you're trying to push the wrong message, change your platform. And of course, make sure that whatever you're talking about is current. Let's not talk about something 5 years ago that's not relevant. Everything is relevant to the pandemic. Everything is relevant to work-life balance and harmony. Keep the message current. And what we find is a lot of times not giving thought to having a campaign and a plan can make us snooze ourselves. And if we snooze, our customers snooze.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. And most of us on this webinar are from the U.S. and whether you are or aren't, one thing I found fascinating in researching this topic, and it has to do, Sam, with what you just said, keep our strategy current and our messaging current and managed. If we go to some of the U.S. federal agency websites, for example, FEMA, or a big one in the United States is GSA, General Services Administration. You go to their website and you scroll around like Kedron had us do, and look for the link that takes you to their social media strategy. Most of these agencies have actually published their social media strategy for their agency, and I think you'll be fascinated. I was, when I actually went and looked at how much thought, energy, time, innovation went into these government agencies that typically we think of are bureaucratic and old and stodgy. They have a fascinating, amazing social media strategy laid out, and we can read it and see it. And so we ought to be selling parallel to that so that we're in line. We're aligned with their strategy and the way we go about it. So thank you for that, Sam. That was perfect. And then one thing kind of associated with this, Sam, and this is a result really of some of the questions that were submitted at registration, is this idea of value proposition. So we won't spend a lot of time on this, but now is the time. If we've got time on our hands a little bit during this virus situation, this pandemic, maybe we ought to each be thinking about an elevator speech or upgrading our value proposition. So would you walk people through what is a value proposition and how we might refresh that?
Sure.
Oh, so excuse me, Sam. Let me do this. I'm going to skip these do's and don'ts and let people go back and review that on their own. Let's jump to value proposition.
Sure. The best example of a value proposition is a business case. And the one I came across was when I met another salesperson while I was traveling from Bangalore to Delhi. And he said he doesn't sell, he solves problems. And he sold industrial equipment, industrial hydraulic equipment. I said, how's business? He said, it's booming. What's your pricing like compared to your competitors? He said, 3 times more expensive. I said, I don't get it. How are you so busy? He said, we look at a problem and we solve it. So he gave me an example of a Pepsi bottling plant where the industrial hydraulic equipment shut off the flow of Pepsi each time as the conveyor belt took the Pepsi bottles. And each Pepsi bottle was getting overfilled by 10 milliliters. So literally, this bottling plant was throwing money down the drain. And he said, we established that. We worked out in a year how much they had lost, and then it was a business case. So, and he worked it collaboratively with the customer. So he didn't do it on his own. He did the diagnosis with the customer. He worked it collaboratively. He looked at how will I solve this client's problem? And then he put himself in that position. So also he saw the benefits. There was a return on investment. He said, when we got to the final stage, the plant director said, how quickly could you get that in? And I said, it comes from Germany. We have a 2-month lead time. He said, can you airlift it? And we will pay the money of airlifting. And that's an example that within a period of time, they would save so much money that it was no longer an issue to do with price. And I was just being a bit cheeky after that and said, so before they gave the purchase order, did the procurement people tell you that they've got to issue an RFP and get prices from 3 competitors? They said, no, the procurement were told just give them the RFP and give them an advance to get the order going. So that's an example. Think of a way in which you could look at the problem, look at a business case, and that's the best place to be when you're selling. Back to you, Brad.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that was a great example of what is a value proposition and how to make it quantifiable, time-bound, measurable. You know, anytime we can show a customer return on investment, we've got really a value proposition for them. So thank you. Okay, Mallory, before we do a quick summary here, are there any, I know there's tons of questions because I've seen them come in, but I just haven't had time to read them all. Is there a question or two that you think we ought to address before we summarize here?
So there is one question. Do you have any suggestions of business intelligence tools to help generate reports based on federal government, state government, procurement, bid databases, anything like that that you can think of? I'm sure a lot of people are thinking this question for themselves.
Yeah, there are a lot of, a lot of them are subscription services, the Bloomberg government, the Deltek GovWin, grants.gov, but there's also a lot of government sites that are free posting. Daryl, Kedron, any comments on that, either of you?
You covered the ones that I was going to list. To your point, there are, and I don't even know if it's called FedBizOps anymore, Brad, but there are many, no-cost resources out there, that the government, to your point, Brad, produces that are akin to the Bloomberg governments, the GovWins, and the Deltek. So they are out there. Daryl, did I miss any that are top of mind to you?
No, you guys have covered it pretty thoroughly, and it's not my strong suit, so I will punt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to research. Some will cost money. Others can be done just by good old-fashioned digging. Any others, Mallory, before we wrap?
I think we have answered most of them through our dialogue here.
Okay, awesome. All right, Kedron, would you walk us through just a quick summary, and then we will wrap it up.
Absolutely. I think I tried to think, if I were, in kind of the listener's shoes, what do I want to take away, from this hour? And I think we've all said it. It's invest in your client and customer interactions, and I think that's always important, but never as important as right now when you invest by prep and focus. How do you do that? You establish rapport and trust. You do this by, understanding your prospect's business and ecosystem as best as you can. Set up Google alerts, use alerts as to when your customer or program is mentioned in the media, that will, that will proactively or be sent to you directly in terms of what's going on in their space. Manage your pipeline and P-win, as Daryl mentioned. I think when we talk about investment, you want the deals that have the higher probability of winning to take up most of your time and due diligence. That's where you invest your research and time in. So that might ebb and flow according to your pipeline, but be mindful of your time. Keep qualifying your opportunities. Again, as Daryl mentioned, take copious notes at every interaction with your customer. And what I always used to do is every time I would visit my pipeline, whether that was on a weekly basis or whatever the cadence is, I would refer back to those notes and just really try to piecemeal and pick up, okay, what is going to be my focus in the next touch point or in the next conversation. Add value to every engagement. We've talked about that. Expand your footprint by attending virtual events. Again, Zoom, GoToMeeting fatigue is a very real thing. I think we can all, whether it's family or work-wise, we can all relate to that, but push through. This is a great time to attend events. Everything is virtual. Take advantage of that in this kind of unfortunate time that we're in. Good marketing content is critical. We talked a little bit about this. Activate your LinkedIn. Repost articles from your company. Show your activity. Show that you are a budding or existing subject matter expert in your space. It's all about generating traffic. It's all about the algorithm. But just as the video said, people, and when I've been on the client side, I absolutely Google or link, find my salesperson or whom I'm about to meet with on LinkedIn just to see their background and see, kind of size them up, if you will, before we connect. And finally, have a work or mentor coach. Again, this is the best time, even if it's internal to your organization, someone that you really normally wouldn't reach out to or use as a sounding board or understand their business. Everybody, travel isn't as active as it was. Everybody's at their desk. Schedule a one-on-one and get to know someone, because I think it could be of value. And you can leverage as you try to close deals. Thank you, Brad.
Great, thank you for that. Was a great summary. So thank you all, Mallory, Daryl, Sam, Kedron. Thanks for investing time in this day. Great ideas, some great thoughts. We'll post this on our website, of course, for replay or download. We're putting here our next webinars coming up. We've got one in October, another one in December. We certainly invite you to. And again, thank you for your time today and interest. And if we can help in any way, answer questions, please let us know. And look forward to having many of you hopefully on our webinar next month. Thank you all.